All right, today we talked with Caroline. Let's hear a quick intro.
I'm Caroline Williams. I'm the founder of the Do Good Only company. I'm based out of Rotterdam, the Netherlands, and I play banjo, cause trouble, and my whole goal is busting every single system that has anything to do with data and AI that is unequal.
So welcome back to another edition of Are You a Robot? This is a series where we aim to tackle some of the greatest questions that stem from AI and related technologies. I am your host, Demetrios Brinkman, and the way that we are going about this is by gathering some of the best and brightest minds, the people that are working on really cool stuff, and we're asking them on here to talk with me about what it is they're doing, how they see the state of affairs, if there's anything that we need to be especially vigilant on, and then we have a conversation. The conversation does not stop here, though. If you would like to continue with the conversation or you want to bring up any kind of questions or comments that you here that are related to the themes and topics we talk about on the show, I encourage you to jump into our Slack channel where we've created a nice community. You can find the link to that Slack channel in the description. And yeah, come introduce yourself. Let us know what makes you tick and what you thought about the episode, and let's have a conversation. Last but not least, I want to mention our sponsors. EthicsGrade has been with us from the very beginning. They're doing some incredible stuff when it comes to ESG ratings. More specifically, they are looking at the AI ethics programs of different companies that we've all heard of and may love, may hate, depends on the company. You can go and download the scorecards where they rate these different companies on 6 different attributes, and you get to see what exactly this company is doing in reality. Maybe they say that they have a strong data privacy policy, but are they upholding that? EthicsGrade can tell you all of that and more. Just check them out at ethicsgrade.io to find out more information. You can check the link out below. And that's it. Let's jump into the conversation with Caroline.
Are you a robot?
Well, welcome to the podcast, and I am very excited to talk with you. It is always interesting when I'm doing my research on someone and they advertise themselves as the founder and head rebel of a company. I would love to know a little bit more about your background and how you ended up where you are today.
It's a colorful story for sure, as most stories are. I think I've spent my whole life not fitting in. It started early on because I am the oldest of 4. My dad is in the Navy, so we were always moving every year. So every year you're in a new city, a new school, and you're like the new kids. So I learned very quickly, also because we came from a big family with 4 kids, and I had twin brothers, and my mom was from the Netherlands, so she had an accent. So all of these things combined, and we all had weird names. We didn't have names like Max, Amanda, Susie. We had, my name is Caroline. My brothers are Cedric, Dylan, and Rupert. So you can imagine that we sort of we were set up for not fitting in from the get-go. And that is a value that has played its way into my whole life. I've never really done anything that other people have expected me to do, but somehow I'm doing all of the things now that I'm supposed to be doing, right? So all of the experiences I've had from changing schools, moving all the time, not getting expelled from university the first time, going to work, and then going through the community college experience because my credits were too old, and then going back and finally getting my bachelor's when I was 36, being a self-taught techie, loading airplanes, having worked as a bouncer, you name it, has all formed me into the person that I am today and into my company. And 3 years ago, I was still working for Microsoft, Microsoft Netherlands, and with an inevitable reorg came the news, when your position is up, we can get you a recruiter and you have 6 months. And at that time, I was had been piloting the Azure Academy, which was to teach women data science skills. It was a pilot. And I was coached, I was learning it, I was doing it, and I was getting these 24 women through it as well. And I was like, I'm doing exactly what I'm meant to be doing, so I don't need that recruiter. I'm just going to go do it elsewhere. And the HR person and the manager looked at me like, that's not the answer we were expecting. And I'm like, where do I need to sign? And I'm going to finish, I want to finish the Azure Academy because we're right in the middle. And they were like, oh, you would do that? And I'm like, of course, and then I walked out of there, went back to the academy, went with the day's material. And as soon as my last student had turned in her machine learning capstone, I made the appointment to go and incorporate and to start my company with the goal that if we want to change who's working in tech and what's being built, you have to do it openly and it has to be hands-on. It's not enough to just say, okay, we're going to start this program, go learn it, go to a boot camp. When you come out, you'll be hired and you'll be skilled. And I knew that if it was already difficult, if we're looking at technology and the technology workforce, and they're already, pretty homogenous, then how could I mix that up even further? And I was like, when I started to do this myself with my company and started to build it, I was like, women are one part of the equation, but inclusion is a lot bigger than that. It's a lot bigger than gender. And I was like, let's mix this up. And now we're on our 7th cohort, we'll be starting. And we have people people who are over 50, which in the Netherlands is kind of considered like, you're no longer useful to society, so go get your early pension and don't bother about reskilling. Just enjoy the time that you have. To parents returning to the workforce, to people coming out of the migration and the refugee streams, to people who were just told their whole lives, you don't really belong in tech or you're not smart enough for that, to people who just want to grab a chance to do something different and they're fascinated, and they'll take that chance. And that's 3 years fast forward. So that was in 2018, fast forward to now. And that's what we do. And we have built a community. And the head rebel portion of it is, first of all, I want people to know when they walk through the door, it's not business as usual. So if you come in, whatever information you're coming in with and whatever experience and competencies, expect to be challenged, because challenge is how we grow. So I'm going to ask, you're going to get questions that other people might not ask you. You're going to get a different way of thinking, but also you're going to get that sense that being here is a place for you to belong, that you can bring all of the parts of you that don't fit because the Dutch really like categories and they like everything to be very neatly placed in a grouping, right? And the Dutch word for it is hokje. And it's a kind of also a mindset. And what's important for you to know is that you can break through all of those here in my classroom and in the company. This is a place for you to grow and flourish and to be yourself. And I also want to save time for people who will be uncomfortable with that, like really uncomfortable. Like there's another tech consultancy company down the road that's probably a better fit for you. But here is where the ideas come to play and where people come to play and to grow.
Can you give us some examples of some of these challenging questions that you ask or some pushback that you give?
Yes, I'm happy to. So ethics are a huge thing in how we look at the world. right? From the values that we carry as a community to how we choose the projects that we work on, the products that we build, how we resonate and connect with our community outside of our core community. And one of the things that I'm known for asking is, well, what makes you think that? And so, like, for example, recently I was in a work group that was talking about women's entrepreneurship in the EU and, how the funding models and the funding is a problem and all the rest of that stuff. And that the representatives from the various people with capital are like, well, lending to women is more risky. They don't take as much, based on our models and the research that we've done. And so I listened for about 3 minutes before I couldn't stop myself anymore. And I said, what if your models are wrong? And they were like, what do you mean by that? And I'm like, well, I'm a data person and I know that a model is only as good as the data that goes into it. And if you're not lending to women now, where are you getting the data on the repayment behavior of women? I said, I don't think that you are. I said, I would be willing to guess that your models are based on and trained on the repayment and the lending behavior of who you are lending to. I said, and that is men. So you're making policy and taking a position in society based on faulty data models. I said, do you want to talk about that some more? And they were like, I think we'll go on to the next topic. But it's things like that. It's things like when people are really deeply concerned about the bias that exists in data and AI, and I'm like, okay, but what are you doing to solve it? What are you doing? Working with data allows us to have a certain degree of distance from what's really happening, right? We're looking into it. We're asking questions of it. We're exploring it. We're trying out theories, but we're not connected. So you can look at the bias in data and AI, but it doesn't make a difference if you're not actually connecting to the real societal problem. We did a hackathon recently for discrimination in the labor market, and the goal was that you would use data or AI to help obliterate that. And in our follow-up conversations, because we placed second, our follow-up conversations, one of the conversations that kept coming up was, but this is not a technical enough solution that you're building. And I said, well, labor market discrimination is not just a technical problem. It's a problem because candidates don't come through into the screening process. It's a problem because people interviewing those candidates don't take a moment. I said, it's not something just to be solved with algorithms. I was like, you can put a high-tech solution on it, but you're not going to solve the societal problem. That didn't go over so well. But those are the types of things, because I want to know why people think the way they do, because I'm curious. I'm curious about everything, and that can be discomforting, for a lot of people. It's certainly because it pushes the edges a little bit. But if we don't push the edges, we never get to the underlying source of the problem.
I completely agree with you 100%. I noticed that the Do Good Company has 4 core values that you've chosen. Yeah. And I was wondering why you chose those 4.
They're the most important things that we can stand for. When we talk about inclusion, a lot of people are like, well, do you mean diversity? And I'm like, no, I'm beyond diversity and I'm off to inclusion, because to me, inclusion is more of an action. It's a series of actions. It's a continual thing. I'm also kind of over that word, so I'm looking for the next word that really captures it. But right now, inclusion will work with it for now. But the idea that everyone feels like, one of my employees was asked, "Why do you like working here?" And she said, "Because it feels like coming home. It feels like I can be myself here." Sometimes it goes a little too far, but it's like, she's like, it's a sense of home. It's a sense that, and when I'm here, and she's like, I've never had that at another place where I've worked. But inclusion is key because we've been, a lot of times, when we're dealing with organizations, they're like, well, I'd really like to send, more students to you or people to learn those skills, but I need you to focus on our group. So I need you to focus on only teaching women or only teaching refugees or only teaching people over 50. And I'm like, no, because that doesn't work. Anytime you put people in those categories again, then you decrease their ability to grow, right? Because they're constantly surrounded by people just like them and having the same thing. It needs to be a really rich mix. It should be a smorgasbord. So inclusion is critical for us because we don't shut the door on anyone. Trust is really critical for us because without trust, nobody grows. Without trust, if you don't trust me, you're not going to ask me and say, when you see something in a data set or in an algorithm that could potentially cause harm, because you're afraid. If you don't have a culture of trust, people don't feel that they can speak up and be themselves or bring their ideas to you or to say, this is not working for me or I want to do something different. So you have to have that if you want to get anywhere. And that's something that people take for granted. Curiosity, because of the fact that if you're not asking questions or looking at the world with open eyes, then that may work for you, but it means that you won't bring your full self to your work. And I want that. I want you to be able to bring all of those off the wall, what other people would say are off the wall questions, because that's where cool stuff comes out of. And then honor, because it's so important that you walk your talk. And for me, honor may be an old-fashioned word. It has a lot of associations with it, like knights on the round table, and I'll have a duel with you for offending my honor and all that other stuff. But honor is doing the right thing all the time, even when it's hard, even when you could be so much more successful by other people's definitions, or you could get somewhere faster by taking a shortcut or signing a deal with a potential partner that is really, it's just all about message washing. So, and we need that in our community because everyone in our community is holding the door open for someone else. And if we're not operating on those same standards with each other, then what we might as well just go, do other things. And we call that our itch score.
Can you talk a little bit about? Yeah. Sorry. Could you talk a little bit about what some of these different barriers that you've come across that don't allow like women or people of color or minority groups or people with disabilities to get into tech? What are some of these barriers that you've seen stop them?
Yeah. I don't think it's a lack of training programs. So let's be perfectly clear. I think that there's, especially, it seems like every time I turn around, there's another initiative starting somewhere meant to reach out and help teach people to get these skills. And, that can only keep growing. What I think fundamentally is the biggest barrier is the fact that people are not hiring from these programs. And I think that this is a conversation that does not make me popular. is when I call out companies and say, it's great that you support, programming for this or program women in programming or all the rest of this. But how many people have you hired from these programs that you support with your grant from your corporate social responsibility or your gift giving or whatever? And they look at me and I'm like, because hiring someone is where the difference comes into play. Hiring, developing, and cultivating that person is where the difference comes into play. And if you want to change that, then you need to get off your ass and start hiring. And beyond hiring, you need to make sure that people grow in your organization and can bring others with them. Nobody wants to be the token other. Right. And it's like, there's this debate. Well, we couldn't find enough women, or we could only find one woman, or we have one woman, or we have one refugee, or we have one this. And it's like, it's just bullshit. It's just absolute bullshit. You can find the people. You just need to change the way you look for people. You need to change all of the systems around it. And if you're not willing to do that, then okay, but as far as I'm concerned, then that's your choice. Know that you're making that choice consciously, because you are. So if you notice this also, when you look at the statistics, or the reports every year about how many women or how many people of color, or how many LGBTQ, or how many, all of the other categories, the diversity bingo, the percentages never change. And they don't change because of two things. Number one, you're not changing who you're hiring enough. But the second part of it is you're not changing the culture that you're hiring them into for them to thrive. Women get promoted because women in tech in particular, they migrate from one company to another, because the next tech company sucks slightly less than the one I'm leaving. And it's the same for people who have a refugee background. It's the same for people who have mobility issues. You go from one company one environment that just poisons you slightly less than the one before, and you call it good. And you keep making those survival hops. So I would say to you, for long-term, actual real change, first of all, I'd ask the question, do the existing organizations really want that change? Because I have a feeling that that's not really. I have a feeling that it's a lot of, well, this is the right message that we should be saying, but when it comes to action, again, we're leaving that behind. But make sure that you are developing and nurturing and cultivating your talent and saying no to the practices that are harmful. It's not up to me as somebody who's different to change your entire culture. It's up to you as a leader in your culture and in your organization to change your culture, to set the tone that you want to be reflected. And it's not something that you can reverse engineer. Right? So when I hear startups and scale-ups and all of that go, yeah, when we get to X point of funding, then we'll focus on, the diversity and all those initiatives. No, you won't. You either plan it in, it's a deliberate action. You plan it in from the beginning, or you don't do it at all.
It's very interesting that you mentioned that, because just yesterday I was talking with Kelly, who is a recruiter specifically for data scientists. And we were asking about this, or I was asking her about these questions and a little bit more of these tough questions. And she was telling me how there's a lot of lip service out there right now, which echoes your statements. And she also mentioned how it needs to be in the DNA of a company. It can't be something that they just do because it will make them look good. Because all of this is just fake, right? And at the end of the day, it's not really going to be productive, and people will see through it. And so I want to ask you the same question that I asked her, which is a little bit, so it's a hypothetical scenario.
Mhm.
And I know that we can get into trouble when we're talking hypotheticals because who knows? There's a million different ways that hypotheticals can be hypothetical, or there's X factors involved in it. But I do know that I've talked to some companies that are these startups, and they are trying to hire the best out there.
Mhm.
And they don't hire, if you look at their teams, they're only the typical like white men.
Mhm.
And so then you say, well, where's the diversity? And why haven't you hired
Mhm.
any women? And I've gotten responses such as, well, we've tried really hard and we've found that the women that are out there, first of all, there's a smaller pool of people to choose from. And then second of all, the women that we have been hiring or interviewing, I should say, they know that they're very highly sought after. And so then they do a few things that made us think, well, they wouldn't be a good cultural fit. So that's a little background information right there. And think what you want on it, right? I'm sure you have statements on that, and I'll let you get to it. But I'm wondering, in these situations where maybe there is this hypothetical situation where you have a startup that has the different candidates that they're looking at, and inevitably there's more men that they're looking at than people of diverse, or the other, as you like to call it. I love that you say it that way, and it's like, because it's very interesting how we just bunch everyone into this category of other and then say, well, let's get some diversity and let's choose from one of that group. And so looking at this situation, and there is a startup or there's a company that wants to hire someone, they have more males that they feel are qualified for the job, and the females that they feel are qualified for the job may not be as qualified in a way that they think would be best for the company. And so in those situations, I wonder, do you go with a female because you need to have that diversity and it is going to pay off dividends? Maybe they're not the best coder you've ever seen, but like you said, the ideas that someone with a diverse background will bring can be much more powerful than just being able to create an amazing algorithm. And so do you go with that because of the different strengths that someone can bring that aren't necessarily so obvious in a coding interview or something like that? Or do you default because you know this one, they checked all the boxes when it came to the tech side?
So I'm going to throw a question right back at you before I answer that one. Who's to say that any of your male candidates are that fantastic of coders in comparison? Are you measuring? Are you giving your candidates a skills test, or are you going strictly on how they present themselves or how they talk about it? Because if you look at the criteria, if you look at the research and the studies and the criteria, there is a difference in how we express ourselves as men versus women. That men are more likely to be more comfortable talking about, I have that skill, I can do all of that. Nobody ever uses that. So first of all, before you get even to the gender piece of it, my question would be like, when you're bringing these candidates into this process, are they getting a skills assessment? Because that has a skills assessment that actually tests for the knowledge for the work that they're going to need to do. Then the second place I would look at it is, you can tell me that someone's not a cultural fit or all of these other reasons, and I'm going to ask you, do you really need more of you? Or are you not enough? Right? Do you really, Where does that come back to? Is it comfort? Is it that you feel, is that coded language for saying, I don't know how to talk to somebody who doesn't look like me? Because that's stuff you could work on. What is holding you into this space? What do you really mean by cultural fit? And third of all, anybody who believes that a developer or other technical person, data scientist, machine learning engineer, whatever, comes into a job, any hiring manager, or who believes that person has all of the knowledge that they need to do that job from day one is smoking something. The people come into your organization and stay with your organization because what you're doing resonates with them, because it's exciting. It's not a place where they can learn. It's a place where they can take on more responsibility. It's a place where they can dig in. There's these massive things now called search engines, which most people use, especially in IT, to figure out, I'm getting this problem. Why am I getting this error? This is also some of this narrative that we need to actually just stop with. The idea that a developer or that a technical person has all of it up here. No, what the number one skill that any good technical person needs to have is coming back to curiosity. Do I know how to start looking for an answer? Do I know how to start solving for a problem? And it doesn't matter whether you're doing that in Python, in R, .NET, doesn't matter. It's, do I know how to start solving for that problem? So when you look at things from that perspective, then I kind of think that your argument, your hypotheticals don't really make sense anymore in that sense, because I know it's not so much of a hypothetical. I know it happens all the time. But this whole fear that if we hire someone who doesn't look like us or doesn't, drink the same beer as us or can't participate in the Friday afternoon rituals like we do, this whole fear is that by hiring someone who doesn't fit into that, we're somehow losing something of ourselves, right? It's like the idea that if I support gay rights, then somehow I'm undermining, like in what was common in the United States, the argument was, well, if you're for gay marriage, you're against my marriage, and it's like the expansion of something, the expansion of opportunity, the expansion of rights, the expansion of a place in society does not take away from anyone else. It's expansion. So to all these startups and scale-ups and regular size organizations who have this belief that somehow going in a different direction is going to take away from my success, need to really consider how are they defining their success. Because if your success is that fragile, that adding these dimensions to your workplace can cause the whole thing to go under, then you have other problems, right? So I don't buy into any of that. I know it's there. I've experienced it. My community experiences it, but I don't buy into it. It's just an excuse. And
which is exactly why I asked.
Well,
I knew you would have some thoughts on it.
The other thing that is part of that is we have bought in. People continually try to feed us this model that this is the only way to succeed. It's the same thing with startups. It's not the focus on, are you building something that is long-term sustainable and is a business that can stand on its own and creates, the impact that you want to have. It doesn't all have to be that. Everybody defines impact differently. It's this, well, you've got to come up with this idea. You've got to get it tested. You've got to have a lot of pop around it. And you've got to be securing investment for it all the way so that you can get to a super great exit and, be the next thing. There's all that hype that plays into it too. It doesn't have to be that way either. And for startups who think that, they have to have the best talent ever to survive, I would be more interested. And as somebody who's, walking that tightrope every day, I'm way more interested in, am I building my company and my organization to exist for the long run? Not am I trying to build this pressure cooker to get acquired by somebody else so that somebody, and then I go on and do something else. No, I am building my empire, if you will, for the long run. And that's a very different focus. And it doesn't do me any good to have a constant churn and turnover also in a startup. But again, it's where you focus and what's important to you. And do you question through the hype? You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a very important point that you said there at the end. The questioning of why you're doing something and why you feel this way about something, and really reflecting on your own rationale as to why it has to be one way and not another.
It's all about power. It's all about power. And it doesn't have to be one way. It's that we have been messaged or seen that this particular one way is the way to be successful. This is the easiest way because this is where the things that are already defined. And it doesn't have to be that way. We all are capable of saying, I'm going to make this decision for myself. I am going to make a choice, and I am going to take accountability and stand behind that choice that I'm making, instead of letting that choice for me be decided by a recommender or sentiment analysis or, things like that. It's, I am taking control of my life and my existence and the impact that I have on this planet every day, and I am making those choices.
So at Do Good Only company, do you try to partner with different corporations or companies, startups, to help the idea that you were talking about, like the breaking down the barriers of this recruiting and making sure that companies that are out there talking about these things and talking about how interested they are in these things, they actually walk the talk?
I love this question because it gives me so much opportunity to talk about how it can be different. First of all, I believe in conversation above everything. So you can have complete polar opposite views, experiences, and thoughts. If you walk into my lab, I'm going to have that conversation with you. So, and that already for a lot of people are like, whoa, that's kind of weird. But I want to know why you think the way you do, what leads you to think, where are the similarities, but then where are the differences, and what is really behind all of these things. And if I don't know, and I'm not willing to have that conversation with you, then I need to not be doing the things that I'm doing. Because as long as I'm not listening to you, I'm also not practicing inclusion. As long as I'm staying in my bubble, then I am not any different than the people who are in another bubble. So let me first say that I will always have the conversation. Beyond the conversation, in moving beyond the conversation and moving into actually doing things with other organizations, then it becomes a different story. Then for you, if you're not walking your talk, there's very little for us to do together. If you want to learn how to make it a reality, or you want to learn to take those steps and you're willing to do something about it, again, I'm more than willing to put my time and energy and my community into it. If you are not, I will tell you no. And I will tell you exactly why I will tell you no. And I've had companies that have found that really bizarre. They're like, but I can do so much more for you because I am, 17 times your size. And, partnering with us is only going to be good for you. And, and then they come with all of the usual sort of like ways to try and convince you. And I'm like, we're not for sale. And with the name of the company that we have, it should be glaringly obvious to you that we're not for sale in that sense. And everything we do has to match. We have to live up to that name. And so I've had companies, I have made, and I say it and I tell them, and then I tell my community also, okay, I've chosen not to go further with this company. And these are the reasons why. My decision for us as a community does not limit you. So if you decide that that's a company you would like to work for, because my goal, of course, is always that people stream through to a permanent employer or their next long-term employer, then let me know how I can support you, because I will support you on your track. It's your choices, and we support those. I don't participate in all of the events that you probably should to get recognition. Oh, look, all of these initiatives are doing this, and come stand over here with this elected official. And I don't do any of that shit because I don't have time for it and I don't care. And when organizations come to me and say, can we work together? The first thing I ask them is say, tell me what it is that you've been doing for the past year. And if there's not enough action in there, and then I would say, okay, we're not a good fit for each other because my company is super action oriented, and I don't have time to bring us into things where that it's not action oriented. The other thing is we focus on building more communities. So everything we do is build with. So I go out and I specifically focus on female founders and social impact projects to find the paying projects that support my trainees out of our lab and out of our training programs, because I can use the power and knowledge of these fantastic group of data professionals that have been working so hard to learn all of this stuff to help strengthen the female founder and social impact ecosystem. Because that's a market that nobody goes to. Because they're like, if it's not interesting, there's not enough dollars, whatever, not enough euros. So we create that ecosystem where by building and giving them access, maybe they'll get a chance to get to a round of funding. Maybe they'll get a chance to get included for an incubator. So I'm very conscious with who and where we focus as far as the work that we do, because all of the paid work that we do supports our lab programs, our training programs, so that we can teach people and keep teaching people. But it has to be the right work, right? It has to be the work that resonates, that these people see the value in what we're doing and understand why. And we have to be able to deliver value to them. We're not a nonprofit. And in the Netherlands, you can only be either a nonprofit or for-profit. They're working on other forms, but in the meantime, those are the two. So when I tell people, I'm like, I have 20 people on my payroll. And it's important that I can keep bringing in these projects so that I can keep paying for them, because the people who are on my payroll or come through our programs, they have an average unemployment time of 5 or 6 years. So getting them back into the labor market, with the skills for today and tomorrow, and building on their knowledge and competency already, it's critical that they could be supported. We have to be a business. So, but it is a very conscious choice on who I focus on.
Have you seen any examples of technology that has empowered these certain groups that have been marginalized?
I think if you go into communities themselves and take a look at some of the things that they're building on their own, or in passion projects, or however you want to call it, you start to see tremendous amounts of change. When people ask me about the lab and they say, well, don't you want to grow to all these countries? And I said, no, what I really would like is that people come from their own communities, come and go to the lab, learn all of these skills, and then say, I want to set this lab up in my community, and where we're teaching this locally, where we're teaching so that we can claim this knowledge and utilize this knowledge. And I think so. Like when we were doing the hackathon experience, we did it with 2 teams from our community, and the one that we placed second with, the judges in the presentation, they asked me if the photos were real. And I said, what do you mean? I'm sorry, what do you mean by that? She goes, well, you have a picture of your team there on the solution. She goes, is that a real photo? I said, what do you mean a real photo? I'm like, are you asking me if these are the people on my team? She said, well, yes. I said, hell yes, they are. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And I'm like, and the reason that they're uniquely qualified to be building this solution is every single one of them has experienced discrimination in the labor market. And we are building that so because they've experienced it. So we're not building, we're building it out of experience, and that's critical. And they're building it themselves. I'm steering, but they're building it themselves, and we're continuing to build it with the community. That everything you just have to look harder, and more importantly, you have to make sure that the knowledge gets into a community. This is the problem with data and AI. One of the problems with data and AI. It's knowledge that's held in a very specialized group. And it isn't that there aren't people who aren't wanting to see it do the right thing in that group, but very rarely is it expanded to include the communities that could be impacted by it. Because we're coming at it from this position that we are ethically minded individuals, and we are, oriented towards this, and we need to kind of make sure that it doesn't go completely off the rails. But we are failing to transfer that knowledge and stopping and saying to community, where for you, what is data justice? What is a problem in your community? This is where there's some fantastic points in the book Data Feminism by Catherine D'Ignazio and Lauren Klein. They highlight projects, particularly in the United States, where the communities push back for every time a university wanted to send data-minded people to them and said, you need to leave this knowledge in the community. In exchange for what you want to get out of us, you need to teach us how to do this. And when I was reading that, I was so like, oh God, yes, more of those things, right, need to happen. But this is key. This is a key part of, if we really want to change the future of data and AI, then we need to stop with holding the knowledge only for if you studied at a high university, or if you've found your way through that spectrum. We need to open it up. Because otherwise we'll keep getting stuff that isn't as relevant.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And it feels like the idea of, you need subject matter experts involved in any data product. And who better to know about this than people who have felt the effects of it when trying to go out and get a job. So I think it's probably worth you explaining about the lab and what that is. This was going to be one of my first questions, but we jumped right into the nitty gritty right away. So it was poor form on my part. But it would probably be good for everyone listening, because they're probably thinking, what is this lab that you're speaking of?
Am I growing stem cells or whatever? I like to think of it, I'm growing revolution. The SkillsUp Lab is the program that we run. It is a lab. It is our classroom in an old police station, which makes it even funnier. That where we teach people practical data science and AI. We run an open program, so you can be. It doesn't matter if you have a degree or you don't. It doesn't matter what your native language is. It doesn't matter where where you come from. And we run this program, and it's the first 4 months are heavy data and data visualization, data analysis, learning Python, stuff like that. And then all of the skills that you need to learn about yourself and what are your strengths. And we call those power skills. So we run that on top of it. And then we offer, if you make it through that part of it, we offer you a paid traineeship for up to a year with the company, with the Do Good Only company. So you're getting your first employer in the field. You may be getting your first employer in a long time. Like I said, on average, people have 5 to 6 years unemployment history. You may be getting your first employer in the Netherlands, which is a big deal, because then the Netherlands is a country with low appetite for risk. So once you have a job, as in anywhere, it's always easier to find a job, right? And in that year, you progressively learn to teach the next cohort. So you're transferring your knowledge. So the community is invested in each other in layers. So it's not a rock star boot camp. If you are a rock star, we are definitely not the place for you. And then you go from 80% of your time on internal learning to switching to 80% of your time on external learning and building things like what we're building for the anti-discrimination in the labor market. We have another project that's focused on women's empowerment, on bringing the data to life there, and that's Project Sunlight. And then we have, all of the other in-between projects that we do to help other female founders and social entrepreneurs or social impact projects come to light. And so in that, like, relatively almost 18 months that you're with us, the goal is to get you to a long-term employer, because I can't keep you forever. I got to make room for the next generation, right? And also because that's never been our model to tie people to us, to bind people to us. We want people to come to us, get the knowledge that they need, share their knowledge like a harbor, and then sail on, and you can always come back. That's the point of the community. But then in that time frame, we're busy helping you to try and get so that you get to that next step, so that more organizations have diverse data talent, right? It doesn't do me any good. I mean, I could operate from the principle that I could have the most diverse and inclusive data and AI team on the planet, but that doesn't do me. That's not what I want. I want more organizations to be great places and open for the talent and perspectives. And so that's the lab in a nutshell. And then we also do then at night. So we run a day program 3 times a year, and we run a night program for teaching just AI with our trainees so that they can teach even more people. And then, my goal is just to keep growing from there and build it into a house of digital skills. So that's the lab, and it's what I love doing, actually.
I find it fascinating, the usefulness of the way that you've architected this program, because I do know that, especially in data science, it is difficult to get that first job.
Mm-hmm.
But once you've gotten that first job, the door's open
Yeah.
for you, and you're much more likely to be able to get more jobs and climb, because there is such a shortage in the market. You can climb fast, and so it's fascinating that you can offer someone that first job. And like you said, it is not first job just anywhere. You're being able to offer someone the first job in Holland, in the Netherlands. It is making it a much different job than if it were just some random job that I found online, and who knows the credibility of it or whatnot. I think that also has a huge effect, not only in the Netherlands, but in all of Europe, and I'm sure in the US, because it's like when you think about the Netherlands, you think, okay, modernized
Yeah.
Western society. And so it has a good reputation.
Well,
So
it's interesting.
That is absolutely excellent, the way that you've articulated.
It's interesting because the Dutch labor market is not inclusive at all. So there's a big reputation for tolerance, but tolerance and inclusion are two totally different things. But that's another story. But what's beautiful about the lab in particular is that these skills can go anywhere. So like a lot of the projects that we do that are supporting the traineeships in the lab are from outside the Dutch borders because it's a tiny country. So that, if we weren't able to go across those borders, we would have less. We wouldn't be able to offer as many traineeships. So it's a way also because your skills should be transferable, right? You may be in the Netherlands today and you may be somewhere else tomorrow, but the bottom line is the skills that you're learning and that you're taking away mean that your chances of long-term unemployment in the future are significantly reduced. The idea that you will, in whatever situation you find yourself next in, that you will have to go through another gap of like this one prior is significantly reduced. And that for us is what we consider sustainability. Knowing that when people leave, go out our doors, the chances that they are going to ever be long-term unemployed again because of skills and knowledge and experience and having gotten a chance are significantly reduced. Health, family, those are all other things I can't control for. But because of those things. And that makes a difference because you can keep building on these skills. And we focus everything on being able to use these skills in the workplace today, right? There's lots of people with PhDs and lots of big degrees and know a lot of theory and can architect lots of cool stuff. But the day-to-day use of data and AI is way smaller scale than that. It just needs to be relevant and make a difference and not do harm and help that particular team reach its goal, right? So imparting people with the practical knowledge and the hands-on knowledge to be able to do that, to start to make that difference, it means that for an employer, they have value because they can be assigned to do something. They can start contributing. And that's really what people want. We want to know that the work that we're doing means something, that it has purpose. Nobody wants to be hired to be the token.
Mm-hmm. Yes. 100%. Again, agree with you. I have a few last questions and then we're going to wrap it up because I don't want to keep you for too long. You have been very generous with your answers and your time. So is the program open to anyone? I am imagining I know the answer to this,
yes.
But
yes, we do.
Yeah.
We don't
accept
everyone, but we are open to everyone to apply. And if we don't accept you, what we will do if we are doubting it because we're doubting your motivation or other circumstances, we'll tell you to come and take the power skills a cohort before. So we get a chance for us both to know each other, and you also leave with more knowledge because a lot of times when people feel their back is pressed up against a wall, they're like, I'll do anything to get a job. I've heard that you're the place I have to come to if I want to get a job in IT. And I'm like, it's not true. But so we are open for everyone, but we select to apply but we select based on that person. Because we are a community.
And do you do, because I imagine it's there's a price tag on the learning aspect.
Yep.
Do you have some like payback plan or something or scholarships?
Yeah, here's how it works. And there are a lot of boot camps who will shake their heads when they hear this and be like, well, she's not going to last. We follow a model where it is shared investment. So the person coming has 20% of the cost is their own, of the whole program cost. And the remaining 80% would be going to their employer when they left the program. That's a huge savings for any employer in the Dutch labor market, because normally to go to a recruiter for somebody with data skills, you're paying 3x easily, but that's another story. However, we look at it this way: we don't want it to stand in the way. So if you come to us and you're only ever going to be asked for that 20%. So even when you get a traineeship, we will never say to you, you have to stay here to work it off. Each traineeship and the program cost, that's an investment that we make that is equivalent to 41,000 euros per head. Okay. So that means I have to know that I have to have enough projects coming in to be able to cover all of those heads. And that means also, if you come into our community, you have to be prepared to carry your weight in the community, right? This is why rock stars don't work with us, because it don't work in our community, because they're all about, I'm here, I want to get the data scientist title, and I want to go off and be data scientist at the next big tech company. Awesome. There's lots of other programs for you, right? We are a community first, and our community is about, and like I said earlier, everybody holds the door open for somebody else. So that's how we follow a model. If after your traineeship you leave us and there hasn't been, you were not able to get long-term work or everything else, again, you don't leave us with any debt. It's done, and you earn a salary in the whole time that you're a trainee with us. So we don't do free labor. We don't do 15% of your paycheck for the next 3 years of your life. We don't do any of that. Our model is we've asked you to pay 20% of the total cost, and the rest we'll work it out either with an employer, or we'll have to have the billable work, and that you'll be able to contribute to. So that's how we follow. That's our model. That's how we follow it in finance. Everybody earns the same. Everybody has the same number of hours in their contract. Everybody progresses at the same rate. And the maximum differential between the lowest hourly wage and the max hourly wage in our company is 4 times. And everybody knows it. It's all.
So talk to us about these. Talk to us a little bit about the projects that bring in money. And if someone wants to reach out to you to hire you for these services and do good, how could they do that?
So we have a couple of different ways. There's the Datamatic, which is like the data laundromat. And that's where, for companies that don't have a data team or don't have a data team accessible, we're happy to take your data sets and clean them up for you, put them into useful format, do some dashboarding with you. And if you have a custom data question around that, we can dig into that and do like enrich it with external data, et cetera. The Datamatic is the number one way that supports our traineeships. So you can think about it. I've got an HR system, I've got a CRM system, and I've got, a mailing list application, but what am I supposed to do with all of these things? We can stitch that together and make that data useful. So the Datamatic is the biggest service that supports the traineeships. The other projects that we do for like female founders and social impact, we are building a platform for youth in detention, a learning platform, so that we're doing the data question around it. We build prototypes of apps. We build prototypes of web shops. We build prototypes of all kinds of stuff to help female founders or social impact get their tech idea out so that they can take it further forward to either grow or to find more investors or stuff like that. And then we build custom stuff, like the stuff we're doing with values matching and the stuff we're doing with the labor market discrimination. But those are the ways that if people want their data they want to get technology services with a flavor of 100% social return, then we're a really good place for them. And then if they say to me later, that person was so fantastic, I would love to hire them, what do you think? I'm like, come on in and talk to them. And if it's a good match, may you be merry and go off together. And they're not sacrificing.
Last question for you, Caroline. Yeah. I've loved talking with you. I've loved the whole conversation. I really appreciate your viewpoint and your ability to transmit these ideas, and the mission that you have is really incredible. Last question is, Caroline, are you a robot?
Only on Saturday nights after too many cocktails.
Perfect. Well, thank you for coming on here. I really think what you are doing is amazing, and I wish you all the best with it.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed the conversation.